I call to order the regular Board of Education meeting on March 23rd, 2023 at 7:00 p.m. in the boardroom of Oak Park Report High School, and ask for roll call, please.
Spivey. Dagmar Ranch. Here. Ms. Darkin.
Here.
Mr. Henry.
Here.
Mr. Martieri. Ms. Harris. Here. And Mr. Costi.
Here.
And Ms. Spivey is here.
Okay. I move to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of district or legal counsel and independent contractors and specific volunteers, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employer or against the counsel for the district to determine its validity. And collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedule for one or more classes of employees.
Second.
May we have a roll call, please?
Dagmar Ranch.
Yes.
Ms. Darkin.
Yep.
Mr. Henry.
Yes.
Ms. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Spivey.
Yes.
Mr. Costi.
Yes. We move to close session, please.
Go. Okay, so.
I understand. Live?
Yeah.
Okay, welcome. We are reconvening open session and picking up on our agenda, our first segment is our introductory reports. And our student showcase, Dr. Johnson.
All right, so our Director of Student Activities is here to introduce two different activities. I think we're starting with voice swimming, is that correct? Or
We can start with voice swimming.
we will start with voice swimming and that.
All right.
So go ahead.
All right, hello, I'm Ms. Hawkins. Ms. Evans couldn't be here this evening, so I would like to introduce Coach Clyde Lundgren and his boys swim team. Please come on up.
Yes, I'm Clyde Lundgren. Thanks for having us here. And I just want to personally thank the board for all you all do in this room so that we can do what we do out in the school and sport arenas and theaters and clubs and all that. So thank you so much for all the support. I asked Dr. Johnson if you had a video set up for me. Okay, so it's we're working on that. And I want to cue it up. It's like almost a 90-second video of our 200 medley relay from sectionals. I feel like the purpose of this time is to acknowledge the state qualifying accomplishments of the boys that are with me. So one of the boys that's in the video is not in attendance. He's on his way to a wedding in Texas, but he's in the video. But just to give you a sense of what our sport is about, kind of the work that goes into it, the sort of unique skill set and fitness and training that all goes into it, kind of maybe get a sense of their hard work and dedication that goes into these accomplishments. So if you could play it, you can play the video.
Yes, 1 minute.
Okay.
And he's queuing it up right now.
Okay, we're gonna be in the center lane. Fenwick is in there as well, and yeah. So this is the 200 medley relay.
I got the sound off because it was echoing home.
So it's a low out in the middle.
If you talk, it's gonna echo.
Oh, we like that. This is my idea to be honest. There you are.
Stop.
This is affectionately known as Mikey. Thank you for watching that. And what you see there is, again, four hardworking guys putting it all together for a team, what looks like a team win. But what you don't see in the video comes on a couple minutes later where the official comes over and says, "We're sorry, but one of your relay participants left early. And so you will be disqualified and you will not be able to advance to the state meet." So I don't set this up as like trying to make it as a downer, but more to sort of underscore the point that we say on the team that hard times don't build character, they reveal it. And what these boys then went on to do, literally in the next event, will qualify for state. He'll introduce himself, but qualified for state, kind of shook off the tough news of the disqualification. We had another boy, same event, dropped 6 seconds in his in his race, did not qualify, but the boys just kept going after that. They put the disqualification behind them and ended up having a fantastic swim meet by any measure. And so I'm just super proud of how they were able to overcome a setback like that and have put a cap on a great season. So I'll let them introduce themselves and they can say what events they swam and give you a memory from the season. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Will Keys. I swam the 200 freestyle, 2 free relay, and the 4 free relay at state. I'm a sophomore. My favorite memory from the season was just hanging out with my friends, my team after winter break practices.
Hi, I'm Adam Pedraza. I'm a junior and I swam 100 breaststroke, 200 free relay and 400 free relay at state. My favorite memory was probably the last event of the season, 400 free relay. We had Fenwick to the left of us, Marvin to the right. We ended up pulling out the win at state and he won, there's he after us, but just had an awesome way to end the season and a great season.
Hi, I'm Lars Roche. I'm a junior and I swam the 100 free, the 2 free relay and the 4 free relay at state. And my favorite memory is being DQ'd at sectionals because that was called on me, even though I don't think I left early. But it's my favorite memory because I remember like feeling responsible for the disqualification and not advancing the relay to state, but then getting past that and then being able to qualify for state, under 3 originally. So.
Hello, I'm Emma Harmon. I'm a senior on the team. I swam the 100 butterfly and the 200 and 400 free relay. I think my favorite memory for the season, Clyde said it perfectly. Our team entirely bounced back from the DQ that we had and qualified 2 top 4 relays, the 200 and the 400 free relay, which we both All-American did in state.
When you're in a race like that and that far ahead, do you know how far ahead you are?
Yes.
No, I guess it's the question.
When you're in the free or the fly, you can see how far ahead the person coming in is, and you're like, oh, I just have to hold on. The hard part's over.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
On behalf of our sponsors, Ms. Kaiser, Ms. Cermak, and Mr. Romeo, I'd like to introduce the Robotics Club, which started here at OPRF during the 2013-2014 school year and is a completely student-run club. They regularly have 50+ students that participate each year on 6 to 9 competitive teams. They compete in multiple events throughout the school year and build and code the robots completely on their own as a team. They typically meet 3 times a week throughout the school year. The students who attend can introduce themselves and tell you all a little bit more about their season, including their state qualification, and how this club adds to their OPRF experience. So I'm going to welcome our students on up here, and they're going to say a little bit.
I'm Hetty. Yeah, we qualified for state. We had 2 teams of 5 qualified for state. And one of my favorite memories is during state, we took down the 1st and 3rd seed. And that was just a great win. We did not expect that, but it was a really good time watching the referees tally up the score, really nervous, but then we got the score back. It was a great moment. Thank you.
I'm Alon. I'm a senior, and I'm also on Hetty's team. And one of my favorite memories was kind of the 4 years we spent building up to going to state.
Hi everyone, my name is Noah Campbell. I'm a junior on the robotics team, and unfortunately, a few of my other teammates couldn't be here tonight. What I'd like to say is one of my favorite memories was probably the bus rides in between, because of course this was, look, if you tell a bunch of teenagers to build robots to play frisbee golf, it's probably going to be a bit of a difficult task. And you know, I don't know. We persevered through the season, and really, like in the end, it absolutely paid off. But I feel like the best part of this is like, no matter like how much we struggled, no matter how much things broke, we were able to just come back together and just basically be kids as we should be. So it's a great season.
Thank you very much. Just keep rolling. All right, next up is our student council liaison report. Do we have our student here? Great. Come on.
Is the middle one fine?
Middle one's great. Just push the button on the mic and it'll turn green. There you go.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Great. Hi, my name is Wanya Shikamlu. I'm student council president here at OPRF. And I'm speaking on behalf of Jacob Drews because he's out of the country right now. I think he's on his way to Japan, so that's great for him. Yeah. I'm a senior here. I'm also part of many other clubs. I'm president of the Music Review Club here at OPRF. I'm also one of the presidents of Ethics Bowl here. And I started a club here called Bio Research Club with one of my friends, Jack. And we recently just had some people go to MIT for the Bio Builders Symposium, so that was cool. But back to student council, we are planned an advisory competition that's for door decorating. That will be going on the first half of April. The theme is spring and positive affirmations, and the best doors will win a goodie bag that we put together. It'll be like cookies, candy, stuff like that. And everyone in the advisories that wins will get a goodie bag. So a little bit of incentive there. In terms of board elections for next year's council, we kicked off our city council elections by having members turn in paperwork this past 2 weeks. And this week we have the presidential candidates run the weekly club meeting, so they each got 15 minutes to kind of give their run their pitch kind of for what we started talking about, which is homecoming. And in April, students will be campaigning and will be notified of the positions that they will run for. We also had the Best Buddies Assembly last week for the Special Olympics Inclusion Assembly, and we won the basketball game. It was awesome. Students really loved it. I was in the audience, and me and my friends were jumping up and down and yelling. So it's definitely something that students look forward to. Very positive experience, and there was so much talk about how great of an assembly it was. So definitely excited for my brother to see that next year when he comes in as a freshman. And last thing is homecoming. It's never too early to start talking about homecoming, especially this year. It's never too early, as we found out that it will be like third week of September, I think, next year. So we started that discussion, and that's what the presidents presented on this week, or the people running for president presented on. Since our biggest event, we always have to start the planning process early. So we started thinking of themes, started thinking of decorations, all that stuff. Club is always excited about it. And yeah, we're super excited to be starting to plan that. That's all I have. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You can pitch anytime. Well done. I apologize for getting up. I actually accidentally deleted my own superintendent report, and I had to get it back up here. So, all right, I have a few announcements here from me to share with everybody. So first, congratulations to the business club for competing at the state DECA competition. The following students placed in the top 4 of their events and earned a spot at the international competition next month. Grayson Adelstein and Joey Damaso, first place on entrepreneurship team decision making. Josh Wood and James Hall, first place, marketing management team. Arvina Benevolenshaya and Faye Evans, second place, sports and entertainment marketing, team decision making. And finally, Angelina Sinardillo, second place, entrepreneurship series. Congratulations. Also, congratulations to the math team for bringing home multiple awards from the Illinois Council of Teachers of Mathematics Regional Competition. Sonia Gutierrez won first place in oral competition, and Ailey Patel won first place in written competition. Trinity White and Sarah Epstein earned all state honors at the IHSA Girls State Wrestling Tournament. Both Huskies finished fourth in their weight classes. Congratulations to both the girls and the coach. Congrats. Junior Emily Pardes and senior Nadia Dillon placed first and third respectively in the Junior Science Humanities Symposium, JSHS Regional Competition, and advanced to nationals. Click here to learn more. When you see the announcements in the notes. And seniors Michaela Neary and Grace Cook have been asked to present their early research posters related to climate change at the 2024 U.S. Ice Grilling Climate Change Summit next March. And congratulations to English Division Head Erica Eckhart for being named a finalist for the Moon City Poetry Award. And finally, congratulations to Junior Yoshi Timms for landing 2 Xfinity voiceover commercials. So pretty special for Yoshi. I also want to quickly just announce a communication went out to all of our families yesterday, and also to D97 and D90 families yesterday, regarding a community conversation on safety and security at OPRF that we are holding here on April 12th from 6 to 8 p.m. So we'll be sending more information about that and reminders at least when we come back from winter break or spring break. We already came back from that. But we'll look at that again, April 12th from 6 to 8 p.m. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Evans?
9 out of 9.
9 FOIA requests. Thank you. Okay, our next segment is our employee recognition segment. So today we're happy to continue our employee recognition program for the 2022-2023 school year. This program is being sponsored by Oak Park Bank, a Wintrust Community Bank, new this school year, and the bank's motto to work hard to be an asset to the people and communities they serve. They salute the faculty and staff of D200 and are proud to sponsor this district's employee recognition program. Melissa Cleveland is here to help present gifts to our March winners. So let's get to our winners. First, we would like to congratulate Yoko Schmedeke.
She can give us a thumbs up if we get it right. I think that's right. Yes, she's
all right.
Yes.
Okay. Who was selected as the faculty of the month. Here's what people who submitted this nomination had to say about Yoko. Ms. Schmedeke, or Sensei as we lovingly call her, is possibly the best teacher I've ever had. She is a very cool teacher who has also organized Japan Fest. She's an amazing teacher and makes learning Japanese fun. She is very accommodating. If you ever need help outside of school, she's there. She's an amazing teacher who truly cares for all of her students and gets to know them. I've learned a lot this year in her class, and I'm happy to go to her class every day. She puts so much work into planning Japan Fest. Ms. Schmedeke did an amazing job at the Japan Fest event on February 4th, organizing something to really push OPRF back to where it was before COVID. The event was a massive success and extremely fun, and I believe she deserves recognition for this event. She cares about all her students, writes individual birthday cards, and makes learning a language fun and engaging. Sensei Schmedeke organized an incredible Japan Fest at the high school, which was an extraordinary showcase of Japanese culture with dozens of activities, including crafts, costumes, dancing, food, and other entertainment. This initiative must have taken hours and hours to organize, and the students and community engagement shows how special Oak Park and River Forest High School really is. She's one of the best teachers ever, super fun and supportive. So, congratulations, Yoko, and would you like to speak and say anything?
Me so happy. Thank you.
It has to be photo op.
And I am Melissa from Old Park Bank, just Sensei, I'm not quite Sensei, sorry. But we just want to thank you for your dedication and as a parent here. I truly appreciate you personally. Thank you.
All right.
I love your t-shirt.
Thank you.
Okay, now we move on to, I would like to extend congratulations to our March Employee of the Month, Heather Van Dal. Here are the people who submitted the nomination had to say about Heather. Heather is an amazing educator within the team program. She was a student one-on-one teacher. To make sure this student received the best experience in my class, she would get in the pool every day with the student, working on specific swim strokes. She goes far and beyond to do what is best for all students. Heather's an incredible TA who does her best by her students every single day. It was a joy to have her in my classroom, not only academically supporting students, but also connecting and building community with them. You can expect to get a smile and a hey in the hallway when you see her. She is welcoming and brings joy and support to every space she enters. Heather's an incredible person. We have been lucky to have her warmth, positivity, and dedication at OPRF in a variety of capacities over the years. First in the daycare and now as a paraprofessional. Her work ethic and reliability are spectacular and are truly appreciated by her team. But what stands out most about Heather is her tremendous warmth, kindness, patience, and love for students. Heather works with some of our students with the highest needs. This requires a level of physicality and patience that many people simply don't have, but Heather has it in abundance. She does whatever is best for students and does it with a smile and grace. Heather exemplifies those things that are best at OPRF, and she is a heck of a knitter too. Congratulations, Heather.
Thank you very much. I was completely surprised by the whole thing. I had tears coming down. My students were making sure that I was okay. It was a great honor, and I love working with these students and at the high school. And thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. And lastly, I would like to extend congratulations to our Volunteer of the Month, Jen Hart. Here's what people who submitted this nomination had to say about Jen. She's always volunteering for different things to support the team her children are on. Girls basketball, girls swimming, boys wrestling. She's also the Boosters Club liaison, attends the monthly meetings as well as volunteers at most of the booster merchandise sales. She's an asset to our community. We are blessed to have her as part of our school. Jen is always the first to raise her hand and volunteer, be it for an event, reaching out to fellow parents, or promoting a fundraising event. She is the liaison for the Boosters Club. In a newly created position, Jen handles outreach to families involved in sports, arts, and activity groups throughout the school. Jen is always ready to volunteer with a smile, and she provides valuable insight to both current family and alumni perspectives. She is there for most of the sales, works endlessly on getting parents groups to be more involved. Whenever a project is happening, she is on it. Jen is passionate about student success. She wholeheartedly gives her time helping the boosters run events and raise money because she knows our success will help our schools succeed too. Jen is an OPRF graduate and mom to 2 current students. We are thankful for her time and her passion. She goes above and beyond volunteering her time for Boosters Club activities and helping raise money for various student activities. Jen volunteers not only for Boosters, but also volunteers for the wrestling team. She's always willing to help as a Boosters liaison with the sports teams and coaches for the Boosters. She is tireless in her work for the boosters and willing to help in any and all facets she is asked to. On top of that, she does it graciously and always with a smile. So congratulations, Jen. And is there something she would like to say? Don't believe she's here.
No, she's not.
Okay. Well, that concludes our employee recognition and moves us to public comment. So, public comment, please limit public comments concerning matters within the jurisdiction of the Board of Education to 3 minutes. It's not, this section is intended not to be a dialogue with the board, and the response time to any questions asked will be up to 2 weeks. Lisa, what's our?
We have 6 in person, 4 via Zoom, and 4 to be ready to the minutes.
Okay. So, we have that's 6, that's 10, 3, 30, which is, we are gonna, everyone will be allowed to speak. I will be giving a 15-second warning at 3 minutes. We have to stop because we have 10 people and 30 minutes and a lot of board work. So when I say stop, it means stop. Please, let's get going.
Our first speaker, Ms. Monica Sheehan.
Thank you and good evening. I'm Monica Sheehan. I want to thank the members of the Community Finance Committee for their work in general and for reviewing the funding scenarios for Project 2. I appreciate their inclusion of the actual cost of debt certificates in the chart. It is not $0 as misleadingly promoted by the administration. The CFC also discussed the best practice or common practice or standard practice, whichever you prefer, of funding major capital projects, which is to place all of this borrowing on the ballot and referendum bonds. The new scenario 4 is not best practice and should be dropped from consideration. It is an affront to taxpayers. The administration removed non-referendum bonds, leaving only debt certificates from the already undemocratic scenario, which means that taxpayers would have no petition process to put the funding on the ballot where it belongs. We know that more than 23,000 Oak Park voters, and certainly many River Forest voters too, want to vote on the funding for major capital projects. Last week, the administration falsely promoted that districts 203 and 113 use debt certificates to fund recent projects. My search of the school's websites proved otherwise, and I posted the information on Facebook. Without that action, it's unlikely that the administration would have corrected its false narrative at the CFC meeting on Tuesday. D200's false narrative appeared to be an attempt to justify the new scenario 4 and circumvent voters on Project 2's funding. Also last week, the administration presented a disingenuous chart on D200's self-identified comparable districts, understating their use of referendums to fund major projects. I researched the district and have an updated chart for you. In campaigning for the board, all of you ran on the need for fiscal responsibility, accountability, transparency, and increasing stakeholder engagement, which means that putting a controversial project with a $102 million price tag to referendum is a given. 4 board members specifically said that Project 2's funding would go to referendum. In 2019, Fred Arkin said his vote to issue non-referendum bonds in 2015 was a mistake, and he would not make that mistake again. He gave his word that the funding for Project 2 would go to referendum. At the same forum, Sarah Dixon Spivey said her vote to bypass taxpayers was a big mistake, and she regrets it, and she would not make that mistake again. At the 2021 staff forum, Tom Kofsky said that Project 2's funding would go to referendum, as did Marianne Moharaj. The D200 voters expect you to keep your word and act ethically. Scenario 2 is the only transparent and ethical proposal to fund Project 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sheehan. Our next speaker, Mr. Gordon Chalmers.
Good evening. I'm Jordan Chalmers.
And I'm here to voice my support for financing scenario number 4 to have project 2 started as soon as possible. And these residents who stand behind me tonight represent just a small segment of our larger community who want this work done now as well. I appreciate the years of work that the board and the Imagine Group have put into coming up with a well thought out plan to meet the needs of OPRF students. The Imagine Group is a perfect example of group thinking and invoking the democratic process. It is now time to put that effort directly into shovels in the ground. This school needs this work done now, and this community wants this work done now. There's a financial cost to all of us to be able to live in this vibrant community that we all call home. This school is the community's most valuable asset and the backbone of why many people choose to move to Oak Park and River Forest. Education is what we produce, and we must continue to invest in it. I reviewed the 5 financing scenarios that have been proposed from most expensive to least expensive. And while I'm sure they all have their own merits, let us not debate over what amounts to $5 per week on our tax bills. Let us instead discuss how soon we can get this project started and completed so students can benefit from a 21st century learning environment that they deserve. While I recognize that there's a very small group of people who don't view the plan for Project 2 as being perfect, it's important to realize that while residents do get an opinion on community issues, it's obviously not realistic for every resident to have a say on every specific design, construction, and financing element of a project of this magnitude. It just isn't possible. At some point, there must be trust in the professionals and elected officials that we have chosen to be on this board and represent the students of OPRF. This project was fully thought out with community involvement and is ready to start. It was stated by one of the board members at a February board meeting that this work probably should have been done 20 years ago. And while we can't change that now, let's not still be sitting in this very same room in the year 2043 talking about what should have been done back in 2023. I urge the board to vote in favor of financing scenario number 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Our next speaker, Mr. John Grant.
Hi, I'm John Grant. I've been living in River Forest for 16 years and I have a sophomore at OPRF. I want to thank the board for spending all of your time or a lot of time and energy helping the school out. And also I want to apologize if somebody has said what I'm about to say before. I haven't been to meetings before. So basically, maintenance and upkeep or care, whatever word you want to use, is required in lots of situations in life. You need to do it with your car, with your house, your health, your marriage, so many different places. And I think we need to do it with the school. So I think the decision to move ahead is basically about that. The only complication when you're deciding how to care for or maintain things is doing it the right way and at the right time. It does appear that there have been rejected plans over the years, but it definitely appears right now that the projects on the table is the right project at the right time, and the board and the community has decided that as well. And I have to say also, as a person with experience managing construction, that the job you did on the first phase was fantastic. So basically, given that we need care for the school and that this is the right project at the right time, I want to voice my support for the board in what has been a well-publicized decision and voice my support for option 4, which is the way to take care of the school without further delay. Due diligence has been satisfied. Further quibbling at this point would be an exercise in seeking perfection, but due diligence does not require perfection, and perfection will never be achieved anyway. So let's get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Our next speaker, Ms. Ann Carter.
Hello, my name is Ann Kreider, and my husband and I have 2 daughters here at OPRF and also a 7th grader at Julian. And I appreciate having the opportunity to come before you again to talk about Project 2 and the next step, the funding. Generations of Oak Park and River Forest children have not had adequate physical education facilities at this high school due to the inability of our community to get the critical work accomplished. Generations. This is not a badge of honor when a current student says, oh, my grandparent or my great-grandparent played basketball in this gym. They swam in this pool. They changed clothes in this locker room. That's not a badge of honor. It's sad. It's embarrassing. We can do better. However, this board, you have shown that you are looking out for the best interests of our Oak Park and River Forest children. You did that by undertaking Project 1. The critical work is allowing more tutoring time. It's desperately needed classroom enhancements. And all of this is especially crucial as we emerge from the pandemic. This board has also demonstrated its dedication to the best interests of our children by agreeing to a track and fields project. This is going to serve our largest and most demographically representative extracurricular program, the track and field team. So now, Project 2, here we are. You have acted in the best interest of our children by approving the scope of Project 2. Now you decide the funding. And I'd ask you to keep the best interests of the children the top priority. And I encourage you to keep in mind that there are non-financial costs to any potential delay. There are things you cannot put a dollar amount on, and that would be student morale and community morale. I believe pushing Project 2 to a referendum might appease a minority of community members in the short term. But I believe divisive rhetoric that would surround a referendum vote would cause long-lasting divides in our community. And quite frankly, I don't think we can handle that right now. We are a community that is still recovering from a pandemic and all the divisiveness that came with it. So I ask the board to consider not just the financial bottom line, but the social and emotional impacts of the funding decision. Invest in the infrastructure now, ASAP, because you will be investing in the current and future generations of Oak Park and River Forest children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Our next speaker, Ms. Allison Roach.
Good evening. Your next decision about Project 2 in my mind is a funding decision. It's not a community engagement decision. Community engagement has happened over the past 7 or really more than that years as the master plan was developed to guide upgrading the century-old facilities. Community engagement also happened through hundreds of hours of work by the volunteers on the Imagine team, through listening sessions, surveys of students and families, tours of peer institutions, meetings with teachers and staff, inventories and investigations of countless spaces in this very building. The list goes on. Even last spring, additional programming meetings were held to independently reconfirm that the Project 2 needs were there and to ensure that the Project 2 needs were still relevant to what we need today. So as our elected board, you unanimously agreed with the community that you engaged and approved the scope of Project 2. Again, your next decision about Project 2 is a funding decision, not a community engagement decision. Through a recent FOIA request, I discovered that this board received close to 100 letters from distinct members of this community between January and March related to funding Project 2. And just shy of 70 of those 96 letters represented taxpayers asking you to move forward with this project without delay and allow students to experience the modernized, right-sized facilities they deserve as soon as possible. You have received funding options from the Community Finance Committee, and specifically scenario 4 that would allow D200 to move forward now and break ground in late spring 2024 and finish by fall 2026. And in the meantime, over 2,400 new students will enter OPRF, and current 10 and 11-year-old fifth graders will be freshmen in the fall of 2026, who incidentally were barely in preschool when the last referendum was held. Time is flying. Approving to fund the project without referendum bonds can offer a check and balance to the board and administration, encouraging fiscal responsibility so that the budget is managed within the standard operating tax levy versus adding a second taxpayer levy that's for the referendum funding. Choosing not to go to a referendum is listening to the voices of your many constituents. Scenario 4 is a fiscally responsible option, ensuring the soonest possible usage of the spaces. In fact, it's the earliest return on our collective investment.
15 seconds.
Please remove hurdles in the way of progress toward the desired end result our students so deeply deserve. Please understand the benefits of this project are not only about the bottom line.
Thank you, Ms. Welch. Our next speaker, Mr. Kevin Papard.
I have hard copies of my detailed proposal that you can pass around so people can read them. I don't have time to go through that tonight. I will summarize them. Good evening. For your convenience, I'm giving you hard copies of my detailed analysis and proposal on project 2 financing. The Wednesday Journal has asked me to slim it down for an op-ed piece. All of Elizabeth Hennessy's 5 scenarios conceal the true cost to people. Rather than ease things for current taxpayers, they instead make things worse than need be. Unless the next generation who will benefit from the assets fully contributes to the financing, the cost must go somewhere else. It ends up as concealed opportunity cost to present people. It assumes that your massive overtaxation since 2006 will never be returned, and that overtaxation will continue into the far future for debt certificates. Those need not be the case. When you ask, Kevin, why would you tax money via bonds only to return existing cash? I answer, because there are 2 different sets of people with 2 different time horizons. There are the people of today who are overtaxed, and the people of tomorrow who will benefit from the new asset. I'm calling for you to do project 2, 102 or 108, whatever it's going to turn out to be. It's just have the next generation pay for it, as would normally be the case. So all I'm doing is unwinding the past mistakes you've made. Take a few minutes and read my analysis and proposal. Elizabeth Hennessy is not fond of all school financial wisdom. Quit ignoring the real cost you have imposed on people in the past and now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Papard. Our next speaker via Zoom. And please excuse me if I mispronounce your name. Pete Prokopowicz.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, whenever you're ready.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm asking if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I'd just like to quickly say that an expense of this size and this duration of use should be put to a referendum. That's the standard practice. The voters of Oak Park and River Forest have been very generous over the years with D200. And if they see the value in this investment, they will approve it. I think everybody here tonight is saying, of course, it'll be approved. But it needs to be put to a vote. And if it's not approved, it needs to be adjusted. Not too long ago, the D200 board abused the taxpayers by raising taxes much higher than necessary without getting voters' approval for that plan. And the result is both a huge surplus we have now and lost trust in the board. The board also put a large pool plan to referendum not that long ago, and the voters did not approve it. Finally, the very recent non-binding village referendum strongly showed that the voters expect to be able to vote on referendums for large expenses. In fact, the number that they voted on is 1/10 the size of this pool project. So 2/3 of the voters expressed the desire to be able to have a referendum on that level of expense. I would ask if this, which is the largest capital expense ever at OPRF, ever in the village, I believe, if this doesn't call for a referendum, what does? I hope that the board recognizes that taxpayers have been consistently generous with the district and does not take any action to spend this amount of money without their explicit approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Marty Bernstein. Mr. Bernstein, can you hear me?
Good evening. My comment is about agenda item 11A, project 2 funding. I believe scenario 4 should be discarded. It does not require a referendum. This doesn't make sense for what is probably going to end up costing $150 million or more. Funding needs to go to referendum. The several board members, including Mr. Kosky, Ms. Monraj, Ms. Spivey, and Mr. Arkin, have stated their support of referendum for such capital projects. Other current board members have stated the importance of accountability, financial responsibility, and community engagement. A project of this magnitude certainly requires all of these actions. Also, 3 of 4 current candidates for seats on the board support a referendum for Project 2. In 2020, 77% of the voters supported the advisory referendum to have capital projects greater than 5 or 10 million go to referendum in Oak Park. Project 2 clearly requires a referendum. Please do the right thing and choose scenario 2 to go to referendum. I would also like to say that a lot of people seem to think there is a groundswell of support for scenario 4. Well, the only way to know for sure is to take a vote. That's how things work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Next is Mr. Adam Yaws. And we do not see him online. But I do have a written comment from him as well. Next speaker is Mr. Jason Posey. And unfortunately, he's not online. And I'll reach out to Mr. Posey and ask him to give me a written comment in minutes. And that concludes tonight's public comment.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is the consent agenda. So, before we go through it, are there any board members that would like to pull and discuss any of the specific items? Okay. With that said, let me. Pardon? I'm gonna.
I'm talking to myself, just go ahead.
So I move to approve the consent agenda items as follows. 1, A, approval of the open and closed minutes of February 23rd, 2023 and March 9th, 2023, the declaration that the audio tapes of the closed session minutes of July 2021 be destroyed. B, approval of personnel recommendations, including new hires, assignment changes, job shares, resignations, leaves of absences, and end of temporary assignment. C, approval of the following policies for second read and action. Policy 2:150 committees, policy 2:250 access to district public records. Policy 3:10 goals and objectives, policy 4:55 use of credit and procurement cards, policy 5:120 employee ethics, code of professional conduct and conflict of interest. Policy 5:170 copyright, policy 5:190 teacher qualifications, policy 5:260 student teachers, policy 6:270 guidance and counseling programs, policy 6:310 high school credit for non-district experiences or substitutions, re-entering students, policy 7:250 student support services, policy 7:340 student records, and policy 7:70 attendance and truancy. Item D, approval of January 2023 treasurer's report is presented. E, approval of the January 2023 financial report is presented. F, approval of March 2023 check disbursements and financial resolutions as presented. G, approval of the IHSA membership renewal for the 2023-2024 school year. H, approval of the 2023-2024 newly structured registration fees of $355 for each grade, which will include the IMF class and Chromebook fees, and to approve that all families who qualify for reduced fee have their fees waived 100% instead of the current 90%. The additional 10% would be approximately $3,500. This would be the only cost of the district, as the student fee restructure would be cost neutral. And I, approval of increase of 2.7 FTE for instructional classroom positions and 2.0 FTE for custodial positions at total estimated net cost of $51,000.
So second.
Okay. May we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Arkin,
Yes.
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Martieri,
Yes.
Ms. Harris. Yes. Ms. Clayton.
Yes.
Dr. Lawler.
Yes.
And Mr. Costi.
Yes. All right, our one action item beyond consent is I move to approve the resolution authorizing dismissal and non-reemployment of a teacher hired under a temporary contract.
Second.
And is there any discussion? Hearing none, may we have a roll, please?
Mr. Henry. Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Martieri,
Yes.
Ms. Harris. Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Lawler.
Yes.
Mr. Arkin,
Yes.
Mr. Costi.
Yes. That completes our action, and we now move to discussion. And we have one topic for discussion tonight. Update of project 2 funding. So we'll start with our CFC.
Yeah, so 2 nights ago in this very same place, CFC met, chaired by Steve Miller, who is here, and we have a vice chair, is that the right term? Greg Miller is here as well.
Co-chair.
Co-chair, we have our 2 co-chairs here, and we are here to present the 3 funding scenarios for project 2 that are the result of the police conversations.
Dr. Odell is probably well.
Oh, we also have CFC member Kathy Odell in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. As we mentioned, we just met 2 nights ago, so sorry we don't have a flashy PowerPoint and everything put together. So I put in all my thoughts last night, and I'm going to read through them, and then we got a summary table to share with you as well.
You know, Steve, I could just really quickly, I did upload that summary table, and so if you want that, just let that know.
Yeah, when I
Which one
finish
Which one is it, Greg?
It's the very last attachment. It's called scenario comparison. And then today's date.
My name is Steve Miller. I'm a current 12-year resident of Oak Park and the current co-chair of the CFC. I have two future Huskies that are currently in District 97, including the creator who will be here in the fall. I had the pleasure of serving on the previous finance committee and then serving as the chair of this new one since its inception a little over a year ago. In addition to the administrators and school board members serving on the committee, the other members, we mentioned Greg and Kathleen. The other members include Cal Davis and Petra Guerrero. And Melissa Cleveland, who was here earlier, was on the committee last year, and Kathleen took her place when she stepped out. By my count, we've had 11 meetings since we began last January, including 4 here already in 2023. Our initial focus was on background, budgetary and school finance 101 information and a financial policy review. From there, we were given overviews of the district's long-range capital plan and the Imagine projects. We reviewed the current year budget, financial projections, and advised the board on the 2022 tax levy. We also spent significant time discussing policy 420, the district's fund balance policy. Early on, there was a recognition that the 25 to 75% range in the current policy was too wide, and that the 75% maximum was too high. But the late Cook County taxes last fall caused us to delay a little bit in making a recommendation to change that range. Ultimately, taking into account how low the balances got in December before the collection of taxes, the committee is now recommended lowering that fund balance policy target range to a 25 to 50% range. We then transitioned into conversations about borrowing options available to school districts in Illinois and reviewed initial debt scenarios prepared by Elizabeth Hennessy, the district's financial advisor. We also spent a couple of meetings discussing policy 440, which is the district's debt policy. In Mr. Henry's suggestion, rather than just recommending changes to the policy in a vacuum, we gathered some additional data. Members of the committee gathered the debt and fund balance policies from the district's peer districts. Ultimately, nearly all of them have the same boilerplate debt policy as District 200 currently does. A goal of a couple of our suggested debt policy changes was to preserve future borrowing flexibility for future boards by limiting the amount of debt service extension base or DSEB non-referendum borrowing utilized, as well as debt certificates that would be payable from operating budgets. After seeing that no other districts have codified this in policy, is the committee's revised recommendation that these be considered best practice rather than codifying it in a revised policy. Both districts 90 and 97 have long had historical practices of limiting their DSEP borrowings to 4 to 7 years, but do not have that in their plans. In addition to looking at debt policies, we also looked at fund balance policies for the peer districts, peer fund balance data and trends, and peer available debt capacity. Fund balance policy analysis helped to validate our belief that the current D200 target range was wide and the maximum was high. D200 currently has one of the higher fund balances in the peer group, and as of June 30th, 2022, was the only one with no debt outstanding. The last piece of comparable data that was gathered and presented to the committee was the history of borrowing for the district's peers. Of the 11 districts reviewed over the last 10 years, 5 have passed referendums ranging from 89 to 195 million, with the 6th district having one on the ballot this spring. Of the 10 districts that have a DSEB non-referendum capacity, 9 of them have utilized it within the last 10 years for borrowings averaging a little over 10 years in length. And lastly, 6 of the districts have utilized debt certificates or alternate revenue bonds payable from operating funds rather than a levy, with an average payback of just under 12 years. That is a little skewed by 2 districts that have recently issued large 20-year alternate revenue bonds to fund larger projects without referendums. And those were reviewed at the last couple of meetings. With all this baseline information, we were able to do more detailed reviews of the scenarios from Elizabeth Hennessy as well as discussing alternative approaches. The committee has utilized a rubric for evaluating options by focusing on 4 key components. The first is the impact on the taxpayer. The second is the impact on the district from a future borrowing perspective. The third is the impact on the district from an operating budget perspective. And lastly, how does the option compare to policy and best practice? Based on this rubric, we eliminated the scenario that maintained a higher fund balance level as it was above the top of the recommended range for the new fund balance policy. During our process, we were able to hear from many community members via email and public comments during our meetings. And we also evaluated an idea from the community of abating or refunding the excess fund balance and borrowing the entire amount of the project other than the Imagine Foundation's donations. We eliminated that scenario due to the much higher interest costs and therefore much larger impact on taxpayers. So we're bringing 3 different options for the board to consider, and we've got the summary chart up. Before I walk through that, I think it's very important to note that these are only representative examples with sample calculations for the 3 different approaches. Whatever the direction you choose to go, that the board will not look exactly like any of these options. Factors that are going to come into play as you progress with the funding plan include the ultimate total cost of the project, changing bond market conditions and interest rates, available fund balance, and the funds that are raised by the Imagine Foundation. So option number 1 is the way it's laid out on the first column are the options with the different funding components, and then the different pieces of our rubric are along the top. The first or the next 3 columns are different metrics we looked at for the impact on the taxpayers, then the impacts on the districts on the future borrowings standpoint, then the impacts on the districts from an operating budget standpoint, and then the policy and best practice comments. Feel free to jump in right there. So option number 1 is consists of fund balance, spending down to about a 35% fund balance right in the middle of the new recommended fund balance range, the $44.5 million referendum, and all the scenarios assumed a $12.5 million donation from the Imagine Foundation. That was the information the foundation leadership had shared with the administration, and so that is what all these scenarios were based on. So if we look at it from the impact on the taxpayer standpoint, based on Elizabeth Hennessy's calculations, the portion of that this option that's funded by a referendum would increase the debt service taxes on a $500,000 home in the community by $199 per year. The next column takes into account the impact of any non-referendum debt, which there is none in option 1, and so the total cost still remains at $199 for that $500,000 home. And then the total cost of the project, this is a $108 million project plus interest, would be $133.4 million. If we look at the impact on the district's future borrowing, this is one area that we spent a lot of time discussing a couple of meetings ago. The concern of the committee being that there are lots of projects beyond project 2, and wanting to ensure that the future boards have flexibility and funding options for that from a borrowing standpoint, because project 2 is going to include a lot of spend down a fund balance, that's taking that option off the table and not wanting to also leave little debt capacity. So with this referendum, there'd be still 74% of the district's debt limit available. We looked at the pure district's debt limits available, and the average, I believe, is around 80%, if I remember correctly. 75% is the cutoff point for the ISB financial scoring system, so it'd be right at that level. So that leaves about $125 million of future borrowing at that point, and as bonds get paid off, more of that becomes available. And the third piece of the rubric is the impact on the operating budget. This is a referendum scenario with no alternate borrowing, so there's no impact on the operating budget at all. And so then when we discuss or look at how this compares to policy and best practice, it targets fund balance that's within our recommended fund balance percentage range, and utilizes a referendum to fund a large capital project as well. Any questions on the option number 1?
Can I ask a question? It's both 1 and 2.
Sure.
So I guess I have 2 questions about fund balance specifically. in option one, you maintain a $51 million fund balance. In option 2 and 3, about a $44 million fund balance.
This is actually the amount of fund balance that's spent on the project, not the fund balance.
Sorry, yes, that's what we're spending.
Yeah.
So the first question I had is just why is that number different? Like, why would we not say we want, I think you said 35% was the is that the
Approximate target, it's kind of the middle of that new.
is that 51 million or the 44.2 million or
I have to
there?
look at we did look at revised financial projections at our last meeting, we could see that exactly. Each of these options is illustrative, and so there's certainly flexibility to shift pieces between any of those. One of the things that we talked about and expect to be continuing to revisit as a committee going forward as the district embarks on project 2 would be, as the foundation, solidifies, the donations start coming in, the district may need to make adjustments to the different funding pieces. If we're very fortunate and the community exceeds the 12.5 million, then there would be less borrowing necessary, or there would be less fund balance necessary for the project. But again, each of these components is fungible.
And if I could just supplement your comments, Steve, two things, Miriam, that I think might be in play here is that option scenarios 1 and 3 in this case, in terms of what the project costs, is different than scenario 2 because of a year's difference in timing. So scenario 1 and scenario 3 have $108 million of.
Yes.
So there's a lot of moving.
Yeah, I see. So
the second piece is that the way that the models that we saw were presented is they were all set to get to a target fund balance at the end of year 3, which 2027, when the project is done, they would achieve that 35% fund balance. So it's kind of different mechanisms that kind of land there.
okay, that was super helpful, Tom. Thank you. And then my second fund balance question is just so the range that we have now set. What's the new fund balance range that we're aiming towards?
25 to 50% as opposed to the current policy that's 25 to 75.
And the reason why we're going for 35% and not spending down more of the fund balance and just being at the low end of the range is just to preserve options for future boards, or I'm wondering what the rationale is there.
You have a very detailed fund balance policy that specifies, if you're looking out in the financial projections and you see that you're dipping below that low point, certain decisions that have to be undertaken or conversations had at the board level. And so if we're at 35% now and the district's deficit spending maybe or 25% in 2 years, which means having conversations about making expenditure reductions or looking for additional revenue and things like that. So by trying to stay in the middle of the range, you're avoiding having to have some of those conversations that would come up if you're hitting, the bottom of that range.
It could come if the expenses go higher. Okay, I understand.
We also found that, had you been at like 25% this year, since the tax bills are late, we most likely would have had to borrow. So that's just the cost that we just want to avoid, having to ever worry about. We'll just assume they're going to be on time this year and going forward again, but.
Never seen that.
Yeah. So.
All right, thank you. That's super helpful.
Thank you for the questions. So then to walk through option number 2, and sorry to throw confusion at everybody by renumbering everything. So option number 2 would be 44.2 million of fund balance, 45.3 million of debt certificates, and that same $12.5 million management foundation donation. So if we look at the impact on the taxpayers, That there's no increase in a debt service levy on top of your current operating levy. But the debt certificate payment comes out of operations at $3.5 million per year, as Elizabeth modeled it. And so we've equated that to $199 impact of it's either operating revenues that could otherwise be not levied in the future, trying to get an apples to apples. That was the suggestion of Grace. Do you want to elaborate on that anymore?
No, I just think it was just I think Kathleen had brought that up at the May 13th, March 13th meeting. And then I just reiterated and that's why we kind of put that heading in there, average debt and operating levy impact, just so you can see the different pieces of the numbers. Because I know some people were asking for like, what's the debt certificate cost per year, and what's that money you guys can't use in an operating budget. So just wanted to kind of, like you said, put apples to apples to that number to an extent.
But we also acknowledge that the levy decision is a decision of the board every fall at adoption, and you know, as we've been involved in multiple iterations of this CFC, we've had those conversations of the district levy to the max, or are we able to under levy? And so again, those would be decisions made by future boards each year. But in trying to get to an apples to apples, we wanted to quantify $3.5 million out of the operating budget, what that translates to a homeowner.
That's a more accurate way to put the data out there. I think that was the right thing to do.
Thank you. So then when we look at the total cost of the project, in option 2, it's $127.9 million. The main difference really being not a difference in the borrowing mechanism or interest rates, but the fact that you're starting a year earlier. So it's the $102 million construction cost versus the $108 when you start a year later. Looking at future borrowing capacity, the amount of debt limit that's available is very similar, 73% or 124 million and change. But we when we look at the impact of the operating budget, as I mentioned, it's $3.5 million of operating budget that's committed now for 20 years. Those are those two columns there. This also, you know, again, maintains a fund balance that's within the target range. It does not utilize a referendum funding though for a large capital project, and it commits that $3.5 million out of operating budgets for 20 years. When we were talking about suggested changes to the district debt policy, one of the things we discussed was putting some limits on borrowing options like debt certificates and saying those can only be for 5 years or less, and not wanting to commit, you know, large future expenditures to future boards for debt service. In the end, we're still believing that that's wise practice, but not necessarily something you need to codify in policy. And then option 3 is kind of the potpourri option with a little bit of everything. It's a $44 million of fund balance. It includes $22.2 million of ESEB, $15.6 million of debt certificates, $13.7 million referendum, and then the Imagine Foundation donations. This is not structured with level debt service over 20 years like the referendum in option 1 or the debt certificates in option 2. This was something Elizabeth designed to try to align with some of the conversations we were having about limiting the non-referendum borrowing to shorter payback periods. So it limits DSEB, it uses all of the DSEB for 5 years and only half of the DSEB for 5 more years, and then you have 10 years of DSEB that's not used at all. So it's accelerating the repayment of the DSEB, and the debt certificates are only going out 5 years as well. So because there's much more of the debt being paid in the first 5 and 10 years, this one looks a little different than the other two. The impact on the taxpayer in the first column is lower. It is a blended average though. So if you higher amounts in the first 5 and 10 years, it's much lower amounts in the last 10. It's averaging $138 a year over the 20 years for the $500,000 home of increased referendum. I'm sorry. So for the debt levy, yeah, no, that is still an average because the DSEB bonds are in that and the referendum. And then in the second column, it's additional $50, when you roll in the debt certificate impact on the operating portion of the budget. Total cost is lower because there's much less interest costs, because more of the debt is paid off more quickly, and so you're not borrowing for as long a time period. It does use up a little bit more of the debt limit early on, but you're going to recoup that as you're paying off more quickly. So you're still at 70% of debt available. So that puts you in the second tier in the state's debt scoring system. Impact on the operating budget, it does have a $3.5 million debt service from operations, but it only goes out 5 years. And then comparing that to policy and best practice, we're in line with our fund balance policy. It does utilize a referendum to fund large capital projects, which we believe is best practice. And it is also keeping the operating debt repayment much shorter than option 2, which we also think is best practice. Any questions or any members of the committee want to add and any color to the conversations?
Yeah, I just want to kind of frame what the steps we're going to go through here. So let me do that. Today, what we want to do is make sure we make questions for the CFC. This is their chance to provide us with their work. And I want to publicly thank the committee members for your time, your expertise. This is not easy stuff. And for your efforts in bringing it together. So thank you to all the members of the committee. We want to spend today and what we want to do is 2 things. One, we want to grill the committee and have a chance to ask questions of the committee. When that is done, then we can then begin a different discussion, because this is this is one element of it. What we want to do then as a board is, do we have any questions of the administration that as we look at these options that we want them to provide us with additional perspective and information on? So that's kind of today is asking questions day. Okay. Then we meet next on the 13th of April and at our COW. And so on our agenda there, we will have another discussion item on this topic. In that discussion, we will have a chance to review those questions and probably come up with a few more questions just to fine tune what we're doing. Within the hope that we would then be ready to a month from now, having had the 2 discussions, have a chance to then vote on a recommendation. So that's the sequence. Normally with our discussion, we do discussion at COW, and then but thankfully they were able to bring it to us today, and so it gives us a little more chance to ask discussion. I would also say that in addition to coming up with questions, what would be helpful from my perspective, and I welcome others, are what are the factors? What's been presented here are 4 specifically financial factors, which is what the finance committee was charged with. But what other elements as a board are we going to weigh in on as we make our decision? So just so that we can list them in our rubric that we come to, that would be helpful. Does that make sense from a sequencing standpoint? Okay, with that said, then questions for the committee co-chair. Sarah?
Okay, several. Yeah, thank you for your work. I know it's not easy. I know it's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress too, so I appreciate your time. All right, so I have just some really basic ones. So these scenarios were presented, were these scenarios ones that the committee came up with, or were these presented by someone else, whether it be administration or Elizabeth Hempstead.
These are all scenarios that Elizabeth presented. I don't know if they originated with the administration or with her, but you know, part of the requirement, you know, these are kind of involved calculations that we wouldn't be able to do on our own committee and require, you know, the availability of the district's experts to help with a lot of the numbers behind it.
Okay, thank you. So is this the committee's final recommendation for us, is the 3, or will this be further revised?
This is the end for the committee.
Okay.
We going back, we asked them for options so that we can decide.
Got it, okay, thank you. So I guess, I mean, maybe you can answer this, please feel free to defer, if it's not a question for you, but I'm curious as to why option 1 has a $51 million fund balance commitment, but each of the other options have 44. Why would we not use the same fund balance amount for each? Like, is there a strategy to that? Like, I don't see.
That was my first question, right, and it is my understanding, right, it's in part is that first option is cost more. And so if you look at the total cost of project, right, some of that's going to come out of the fund balance instead. Right.
I can elaborate a little more. So between option 1 and option 2, the construction is starting a year later, and so as Tom mentioned, we're targeting the balances, the percentage at the end of the project. So the percentage, we're targeting that same 35%, but it's in a different year. And so they end up with a different dollar amount there. And then the difference with option 3 is there's debt service coming out of the operating funds in the out years, and so less of the fund balance can be spent because there's debt service expenditures that are reducing the balance as well.
Is there any way, maybe this is a question for Tom, like for a future meeting, is there any way that we can see sort of those pieces of it? Like, I have a different question related to that sort of idea. For example, for option 3, I'd appreciate seeing per year. I get that this is the average cost of taxpayers, but I appreciate seeing a better breakdown. Like, is it $500 in year 1? And then, $7 in year 1?
Based off our numbers we have right now, so that's in column, I'll just go to column 2 there. That's the column that we have in our chart. Years 1 through 5 is 414. Years 6 through 10 is 215, and then years 11 through 20 is 61. So the average goes out, that's how you get to 188.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but I think that'd be really useful to memorialize it somewhere so that as we're talking, we can keep that clear, right? Because that's obviously that's considerable in my mind. All right, sorry, I wrote these down. So is there any, and this maybe is not a CFC question, so feel free not to answer. But I would also love to see like what the start dates are and the anticipated start dates for the project and end dates for the project that are contingent upon these funding scenarios, right? Like funding scenario 1 means we start in 2027, for example, I'm making this up, right? Scenario 2 means we start in 2024, which I think was mentioned. So I think that would be helpful for us too, as we're making this decision to kind of have that represented in something.
Yeah, we can provide the routing, of course, to clarify what you mentioned, but just to answer the question really quickly right now. Options on this sheet, options 1 and 3 would start work in the summer of 25. So 2 years, and 2 months from where we are right now. And all projects would go for a period of 2 full school years, with summers on each side and the summer in the middle, okay? And so option 2 is the one that starts in the summer of 24, roughly 14 months from today. Is that?
Yes, thank you.
But I think, Sarah, your questions, just to kind of capture, this is why we ask it now. And when we meet in 2 weeks, clearly the data can be supplemented because there is a lot more data. This is an attempt to squeeze it there, but I one is just the key dates. The second is a kind of really a 20-year look of things, which is I can tell you was a key struggle with the committee. Just kind of wrestling. It came up with a way of trying to capture something different, but so those were both noted. Okay, keep going.
I think that's what I have right now, but I reserve the right to ask more if I think of them.
Right, acknowledge.
I'll just echo my only other question or request was the same as Sarah's last one, in that I think this particular chart, the one thing that I think would help clarify it for the public, for anyone else who's looking at this is the planning piece, and not just the timing piece, but also I realize you can't give us a fixed number on this, but I assume there will be inflationary costs to starting a year later as well, and maybe we can get a likely percentage or something.
That's clear number that was in there.
Yeah. So that I think that would be helpful to have. It would be helpful to me.
Yeah, the data is that the basis of your analysis is $102 million starting in 2024 and $108 million starting in 2025 on data that was provided by the estimator who put together the project. So that was then the data source of the two different start times.
So maybe just one more little column.
Yeah, you just
I was trying to keep the font bigger, but
Yeah.
it's gonna end up looking like this one.
When you're talking a 20-year spread, we're up to about 28 columns, so don't worry about it. We'll get small. Mary Ann,
That was all I had.
Fred?
Yeah. Hi, Steve. I want to first and foremost thank you and the committee for all of your work. I'm sorry that you guys had to get drawn into some of the politics of it. I know that's not easy. It's kind of why we're sitting at this table, and it's on our shoulders. But thank you. And I do have some questions. Some of them might be very rudimentary. But I want to talk first about the types of bonds that can be issued, DSA, referendum, debt certificate sector. Now, my understanding is the definition of debt certificates are that his debt is issued by the district and paid out of our annual operating funds.
That's right.
It would be that the cost of that debt is levied within our operating levy.
Well, it could be paid from any unrestricted dollars in the operating fund. It could be operating levy, it could be state EDF funds, it could be.
Now, how does the payment of whether it's first DSA bonds and then second referendum differ in terms of funding mechanisms to pay that debt service off anymore?
So as soon as those bonds are issued, paperwork gets filed with Cook County and they have a separate levy that you will collect. So even if the board didn't pass a levy at all in the fall for their operating funds, there's still going to be a levy extended for the debt. And so that's basically a guarantee to the bondholders that they know that there's a separate levy that the county's going to levy no matter what, and you'll collect those dollars to pay that off. So that's in addition to the operating levy, it's outside the tax cap, and the CPI calculations that go into the tax cap and all of that.
And that's what I was getting at, is that if we were to issue either DSA bonds or referendum bonds, those get funded outside of our tax cap, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And debt certificates would be within our tax cap.
Right.
Okay, so that if we got to a point where we couldn't pay the debt service out of working funds, operating funds,
that we would have to go for an operating referendum. To
Or
increase that
cut-
amount,
or cut expenses.
or cut other expenses, right? Okay. We. The referendum bonds are clearly approved by taxpayers. And that is approving the issuance of bonds, right? Or is that approving the levy?
It's approving a project, so the part of the ballot question would be. We want to do this project and then we want to issue X dollars to fund it. But X dollars of bonds to fund it.
All right, we hear the term best practices used a lot. I brought this up at our last meeting. To me, the term best practices means a standard or a set of guidelines that is well known to produce a positive outcome if followed. Is that an adequate definition in your mind? Is there, in terms of best practice, is there, whether it's ISB or the state or anyone out there, a standard or a set of guidelines as to when a district should issue referendum bonds?
Not that I could find, I did some looking in like the national associations, the GFOAs, the government finance officers association, look for some debt policy information there, able to find it. ISB definitely has some, it has specifics on what options are available, but doesn't necessarily work, and I don't think on so when to use one over the other.
Okay, thank you. So we were given a scenario by one of the public commentators this evening, and we had received an email prior regarding basically the abatement of our fund balance and the issuing of bonds to a much higher level of, I think it was $90 million, but giving back $50 million or so of fund balance to the taxpayers. Have you, did the committee discuss that scenario at all?
We did.
What your conclusion?
Yeah, we talked about it at our meeting 2 nights ago. I had asked Elizabeth the previous day when we saw this scenario, can you quickly run some numbers? What would the, I guess it was $90.5 million that came out to referendum costs, to the taxpayer. There were two components to that caused us to not bring that to the board. One, the impacts to the taxpayers was going to be $426 per year, so more than double the highest options here, and it was going to take up much greater portion of the district's available debt under the debt limit. You only have less than 44% of your debt limit available for future borrowing after funding project 2 that way, and so that we believe didn't give future boards enough flexibility to fund future projects.
So the other a couple of other questions, and the first of probably my last question is, we know that from our estimator contractors, design professional, to wait a year to go to referendum, which we would not be able to go to referendum until spring, whenever the election is next April, whenever I think it would be during the primary elections, I think. So whenever that is, and it's going to, that additional $6 million of cost to wait that year is strictly escalation of construction. That by waiting a year, we're going to increase our construction costs by $6 million. That's
was how it was presented to us.
Right. So my other question would be, if this might be more of an administrative question, and I might not be able to answer it tonight, but if we were to go forward with preparations, all right, for the project, Okay, so doing whatever work needs to be done, and I know there's design work to be done, there's bidding work to be done, and everything else to break ground in 2024. Over the course of the next 12 months or so, what would that cost be, so that, let's say we did run a referendum and it was approved, or wasn't approved, what would that, some cost of doing that preparation work for the project be? And
That's definitely a question for us.
Yeah, that's administration, which is a good question. So that's what we want to do, is get these up. So you're just to you.
That definitely is the question that we'll have to answer, and we'll investigate and answer.
Okay, we've got time.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the cost of completing the design drawings, preparing them to go out to bid, going out to bid, and then we really would need, and we at this point too, we don't have a construction management firm definitely defined for this project, so we would need that as well within that timeline. And then that firm would have to secure all their subcontractors as well during this timeline. So there's a lot of steps that have to get done, and there's costs associated with all of it to some degree. So all that would have to get mapped out, and we can investigate that and kind of model that for future conversations.
Okay. So to kind of make sure we frame it up correctly, Brett, I'm just going to supplement here. So one, what is the feasibility, right? Like, is it even possible? What and what commitments would be made with the recognition that the benefit would be that we would not have this year lag and the cap that $6 million incremental cost. I think that's the saving. That's the question. So
then the other cost may be, or the other question, and I don't know how deep you guys have dug into our budget. So this might also be an administrative question, is the annual cost in, or debt service cost in options 2 and 3 is $3.5 million. Right. So the question is, we know that in our budget, we spend a substantial amount of money on maintenance and capital projects annually. Right. Do we know what our savings would be? Right. Because we right now, whatever we're paying for maintenance on those elements that will no longer be there once we complete project 2. What are, and we know we spend a lot of money because we have an old building and it's being maintained, and there's inefficiency, whether it's just to maintain it, or the heating and air conditioning and electricity and everything else. Do we know what kind of savings are in our annual budget that would be available to pay debt service?
Yeah, I want to clarify your question, probably for everybody else. I think you and I are probably on the same page with this. As I hear your question, but you are not asking about the 10-year maintenance plan. That work is different, and the work that we've already teased out in the model. We've already shared back in February with that. We've already pulled out the overlap between the 10-year maintenance plan and the project 2 footprint. And so you're talking about just the day-to-day cost of doing business in the current project 2 footprint versus the day-to-day cost of doing business in the renovated project 2 footprint, and the difference between those two.
Yep.
Guys. Figure that out.
And then also, if we're going out 20 years on this, I think we need to see, and believe me, I understand that 20-year projections become less and less accurate the further you get out. But I think we need to see what we expect our financial position will look like in 20 years, and at what point in time we will have to go to an operating. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Do you reserve the right to come back?
No, not tonight. I'm done for the evening.
Who's the next?
I was trying to see if Capri's hand is up, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, I looked.
Somewhat along the lines of what Fred is saying. But on the other side of this, which would be an administrative question, and also thank you also very much. Your expertise is like really valuable, so thank you for your time. The cost to the students for waiting or not, you know, like that year and a half of time or that, right, if we start. Greg, you just explained it to Sarah, right? When that start, the differences in those start dates. How many students and the impact to students and services, what would that look like? If we were to, if they're to get those services sooner versus later, right?
Yeah,
It might not be completely quantifiable, but I would love for us to be able to include that in the conversation.
So I would say that's a good one as we talk about our quote unquote rubrics, right? That's the key one is student impact. Very well said.
yeah, and I think, I mean, the variable there is, you know, getting it to students sooner, right? And that's really it. I know that, you know, this to just be explicit, you know, what this project is doesn't change, you know, from one year to the next. So you're talking about the same facility in both, just so that's clear. It's really a very little time.
I know, but when you're thinking about how many students are gonna miss out on an opportunity because of the time, right? I'd like to understand how many, right, that, what that might look like.
All right, got it.
Is that it, Gina?
Yeah, that's.
No, you?
You know,
Before we go for a second, Sarah's already draft for her. She's done.
Thanks for the work. I'm just, and when you modeled out option 2. Was the reason for keeping D-sub bonds out of there and not pumping in more fund balance? So in other words, you could have reduced the cost of the debt certificates, which are more expensive debt, so throwing some D-sub in there. Was the goal to have an option on the table that had no debt levy at all? Was that part of what the calculus was that went into that, or?
Right, yeah, giving you 3 somewhat disparate,
So, yeah. So, but it wasn't like, you know, we could utilize DSEV in option 2 to reduce the amount of the debt certificates. We could shorten the term that the debt certificates are out. And we could even pump it a little bit curve and come up with a different. I'm more thinking about different scenarios to make things.
You should have done in our committee meetings. Yeah, there's infinite permutations, that's similarly with option 3.
Yeah.
You can do
That's
it.
yeah. That's all I was asking. My other question.
Sarah, you look ready.
Everybody does not make any sort of.
I just,
I can't see that part of these.
I didn't say as good.
No, he shook his head, no.
All right, sorry. So this is not for you all, this is for the administration, I think, but it also, Gina's question sort of triggered this, but I'd also be interested in having the administration investigate is whether there are additional externalities that will factor into whether a 24 start date or 25 start date is better. I'm thinking specifically about programs need to move to other facilities or having to utilize, you know, another gym space somewhere or the fields, whatever. Like, I know we probably haven't done a ton of work in reaching out to partners to find out what's available, but there might be some easy way to look at that, at least broadly, to see. I mean, if for example, we need a space that's not available in 2025 because of another project, like we should probably know that now and if possible factor it in. I know that gets enormously complicated, so like, you know, within reason, but for example, I think we're gonna use park district spaces, and I don't know if we've had those conversations about what's gonna be available when.
We've had some preliminary conversations, but they've all, of course, existed in this hypothetical context with
Yeah.
an unknown date.
Yeah, but if they have big projects coming up, for example, it would be helpful for us to factor those in.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And then, it seems like a dangerous question, but. Are we limiting ourselves to the scenarios that have been presented? Or to Ralph's question? Are there other permutations that you feel that the board should we be open to other options besides what is laid forth in these scenarios?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I mean, we definitely, I mean, these are three that are intended, you know, through there to show the different pieces to the puzzle, but the exact dollars in each bucket are.
Still moving.
Well, I think they are, but I think that it's also important to know that there are restrictions on a lot of these different things that come into play, whether they're restrictions by law, right? Or restrictions by, you know, what we choose to do. So it's not like you could say, okay, we're gonna do everything in DCEP or whatever in 5 years because we would exceed our capacity.
Yeah.
So there are restrictions that they kind of operate.
But we could say higher, lower on fund balance usage and spend fund balance first and then look at an issuance or referendum later or whatever. Because that's the other piece, right? Because it, you know, when we take out debt, it's not gonna be day one of a project, right? The debt is gonna be taken out over time, presumably, as the project continues to have more bills to pay. So that timing also becomes a factor, right? Which I'm assuming wasn't necessarily part of these calculations, or was it?
Yes. Steve?
Well, the scenario that Elizabeth ran had set times for issuing the debt and calculating the debt service and the impact on the taxpayer and all that, but what I was trying to get across, I think in my opening remarks, is that, you know, it's not gonna go as is on paper here, that you're gonna make adjustments based on market conditions. You know, it might make sense to spend fund balance first because rates are high and you expect them to be lower in a year, and then you would issue the bonds later, or it might happen another way around. We don't know what the timing of the funding from the foundation will be yet either, and so it's gonna layer in somehow, but we don't know how that would look at.
Did you put in a word with Yellen for us?
I did that with N7. You know, even though they passed the referendum for their bonds of 58.5 million in April of 2017, we issued that in 2 tranches of probably kind of putting projects in the case, and we actually on the second tranche actually waited 6 months. We took kind of a gamble, I'll say, but they actually ended up saving us money, so the interest rates really decreased over 6 months on our second tranche, which wasn't until like 2020. So
Yeah, so that's helpful, thank you. And I think the other question I have, and I think it's my last for now, is what access to like software do we have? Because obviously some of this modeling, if you're changing these numbers, is gonna look different, and you know, I think we need access to somebody, to Steve's point earlier, we need access to somebody who can help with those projections. So I don't know if we're gonna have that capability if we are gonna look at other scenarios. Right, everyone has to just really change things and not know what it looks like in 17 years.
I mean, I think we could, through Elizabeth, I mean, through support, they have software, they plug numbers in, it gives you the numbers out, right? You just need to say, yeah, I want to go to this bunch on density because this, right? And if we truly come up with a different number, we can get answers.
Can we also find out how much lead time she would need though, right? Because we can't do it in real time, I'm assuming.
Yeah, actually, so I can ask that specific question, or to give you kind of a gauge of an answer to your question. The scenario that Fred asked about a little while ago regarding abating some of our fund balance back to our taxpayers and raising the price of the referendum was a question that came to us, and within roughly 24 hours, we had that modeled out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and actually much less time than that, because, you know, there was sleeping involved in there as well. So it'll be very quick, the various scenarios that we might come up with.
Yeah, thank you again for the committee.
So I have a couple. If everyone else is.
Capri, maybe.
Capri?
You're saying so. Okay.
I've heard all this before, so.
So my questions, I will start with the committee and then I'll move on to our administration. You mentioned some things that I want to make sure we grasp, and that is there are, you mentioned where if we're at different levels, like in our amount of debt we have, you said something 75%. Okay, so if we can know that, I mean, there's under 25% in fund balance, you're in the penalty box, right? From the state. So what are the constraints that we have that have a financial impact?
Sure, yeah, I don't know the other cutoffs off the top of my head, I know 75% of the first one, it might be 15 to 25, but I'd have to look that up.
75%
of debt capacity available, 75 or higher puts you in the top category.
Okay, so understanding what that is, I think would be a helpful, that's a piece that I heard about the fund balance piece, but not the amount of where we were in our debt. Okay. That was the one additional piece on this data set from you guys. I guess my questions for the administration go more to the operating side, and it fits along the line with what Sarah was asking for in a long-term look and what I think Fred articulated. Because here's the way I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong. You've got a 100% referendum, and you've got 100% debt certificates, kind of as two ends, and then you got the hybrid. So we're going to leave the hybrid out of it because it's kind of just a little bit of each. So my question is, as I'm looking at this data under the debt certificate option, this says that for 20 years, $3.5 million of our operating referendum would be earmarked for that. And that's first dibs on that money. Okay. So as we talk about this, what happens if project costs exceed what our estimate is? That's one. I'm just gonna kind of fire away here. If foundation donations fall short of what is, because this is just modeling, but I'm just trying to understand the what if side. That's the two ends of it, of where we're on, that's on the cost side of it. So what happens to that, and what does it really mean to the longer term operations of the business? My comment more so is that this would put the district in a different operating mode than it's been in for the last 20 years. This district has been through a period where it had built up and had a large fund balance. While fund balance has been kind of a thorn in the side for decision making, it also was, we can do things. We can fund a track and field because we lose a lease. We have other needs like some of the sustainability efforts that were discussed that are part of policy that we consciously said we're not going to put in this project because they're not yet right. But they certainly are in the horizon. So what happens when they materialize or they come forth? So I'm firing away at you. I'm gonna let you fire. You're right. And those were my, I guess, three different scenarios. Because and what does it mean to our operating approach in terms of balancing the budget?
Right, and I know that those terms are broad, but it, it comes to our questions of additional resources. We've been pretty generous historically. So. Do you have those and?
Yeah, I don't need a more complete answer to those questions is something that we can.
Yeah, no, this is, I'm just asking you to bring this back.
But all those questions have the same presumption behind it. We will be in a different, a very different financial state as a district. With any of these scenarios, certainly with the second one, that the seat is put out, that's gonna force us to think through the questions you're talking about, including many of those things that we discussed at this table that are priorities for the board, the community, and the district. And I think the long-term electrification plan of the district is exhibit A in that. So those are, you feel you got the question? Yep, I have the questions. We'll be able to approach those and try to up tweaks.
Okay, and for you, Steve, anything else in terms of any data on this that, I know there's a ton of data, and anything that if we're changing things, right, because what you hear is now you've been driving this car and now you're turning it over to the to the team here. If we make a change and we go below X% on our long-term debt, that means our interest costs double. That's not a good thing. So any thresholds would be important. Okay. All right. Round two for anyone?
I think the only other factor, I guess, Tom, you were asking about like what factors go into our decision making. And you just referenced the business. And I guess I just wanted to say one factor that goes into my decision making is that this isn't business, it's a public good. Right. And so while I totally want us to stay fiscally responsible and not get in a situation where we are in any financial trouble. I do think we should all, that's a big thing that goes into my decision making is, and this goes back to serving the students. So this is, we have the impact on taxpayers, impact on district. I mean, I understand all these financials, but the column is, that isn't here, it's like the impact on the students.
Right? So that's loud and clear, is that that's beyond the scope of CFC.
Right.
And so are there any others? I mean, that one obviously is bubbles right to the top of the room. Any other, I would say, criteria that fit in beyond those? Now it would be those 5, the 4 that CFC had that were to impact the students. No, I'm ready to go into a big speech, so you're gonna there is one I have, but it's something I wanted to talk to. So I've got about a 7-page story that I'm going to read.
Okay.
So, one of the things being talked about, because we're an educational institution, and one of the things referenced is, we're spending all this money on a facility. What about educating our kids? Okay. It gets a lot of, sound bites, and it really eats at me. So I've done a little bit of a storytell that I want to share. It's called, yeah. Where do I'm going to probably start in the middle. So I'm going to present a 10 and a 20-year look, because I tend to look longer term as we address these things. I've lived through 10, but my data is 20. And since we're talking about a project that's going to last 20 years, I think looking back that far is equally as important as looking forward that far in our decision making. So, you know, the question is, you know, are we putting all of our resources in this project 2? And here's what I see. Over the last 10 years, we've spent $590 million. Anyone, let's count that. That's $0.59 billion. B on the education of our students, excluding facilities. During that same time, we spent $73 million on facilities, of which 20 is Project 1. So what is that? That's roughly 10 to 1 of our dollars go into educating our students. They're all educating our students. I don't want to be misleading, but go into bricks and mortar versus the people and resources aimed at our students. If you go back 10 years before that, it was 490 million. Oh, no, that's the wrong number. 450 million and 40 million in what I call capital spend. And that capital spend, just for the record, includes some technology and other stuff that's really more kind of an operating thing. So it's more than 10 to 1 in that period. That was 2003 to 2013, that last set of data. And my perspective in looking at it, that's when we were spending minimalist on this facility, which is kind of the can that was kicked down the hill, even though at that time the fund balance was on a rocket ship to 2013. So we tend to look at our capital dollars differently and our facilities different because we report them as a one-time number, but when you look at it over the long term, anyone who says that we're not putting our resources on our students, I would like to sit with them one-on-one in a debate. We increased our staff during this last 10 years by 25%, which is part of what that was for a bunch, and there's a lot of supports and services. Our student population went up 5%. So more resources towards our students in classrooms to support their educational needs. So that's the kind of the head count aspect, and that was the dollar aspect. You know, we have brought in the evidence-based funding model, which is done in transparency to show where we are and what we're doing and how we're doing. And as you know, as I've communicated repeatedly, we are a well-resourced district, and we are at 138% of what the state says is adequacy, and our students are the beneficiaries of that strong resource support. Ralph, what's the number? 85% of districts are below 100, is that right?
Well, yeah, easily 85% are below 100. It's 80% are below 90%.
Okay. So, I mean, we're in that, you know, we are a well-resourced district, and those resources aren't going to, you know, what I would call lavishness. It's going towards our educating our students. The other thing I would say is, so the dollars we put towards infrastructure have, you know, as I said, have lagged. The other thing I would do is, I'm a show me type guy, even though I'm not from Missouri. And, we have project one completed. And you can see, and what I see is student-centric facilities that are functional, but I would not say lavish. That wouldn't be the word. It's not, you don't walk in here saying, wow, this is what the world of the rich and famous do. I mean, it's moving us in some cases from dysfunctional to functional. I'm particularly geeky about the science classrooms that have been modified, and anytime I need a boost, I go there. So, that work is being done. So as we kind of talk about this vision, and I know we've already approved scope, et cetera, but when people are mulling around numbers and hearing stuff, I just like to provide a little of a perspective of what that is. The other piece of data that I think is important, and again, I'll take my bashes for this one, is we have a very high fund balance in 2013. Okay, and since that year, we've been on what I call a tortoise approach of bringing it down to where it needs to be with a variety of levers that were recommended by professionals, including some give back or some reduction. It was never, people never got a check, and it wasn't a reduction in things, but it was a relief in many ways. So there's a model that I have that shows that during that last year, while I think we were told we were the only district that someone who said this, that didn't take the 5% levy. I don't know what that, very few did not take a 5% levy in the climate we were in. And we didn't take it because we have been looking at that. That equated, because we have all these numbers, that's $96 per household. So as we look at these charts that you have here that show other values that of this, this increase is 199, that was 96 that was left, and that builds year over year over year. That same model, looking at it since 2013, says that over $4,000 was left in the pocketbooks of our taxpayers because of levy decisions of not taxing to the max. So, and we still have a strong fund balance. So not sitting there saying super stuff. It's just putting numbers on things that said, as we look to what the future is, and people say, oh yeah, we got to move the dollars from one generation. Well, that was leaving it there so that when we need more, keep those in mind. So that just a few numbers to throw around. Does everyone remember all my numbers? Okay. So I think I will close on that and then bring this one to a close. So we have a whole plethora of questions for you, Dr. Johnson. Do we need to review them at all? Nope, I got them. Okay. So I would encourage my fellow board members to continue, we know this came to you quickly. If you have questions, we can get them, in front before we meet in COW, or you can surface them in COW. If there are any specific decision-making things, it's pretty evident. Students and finances are kind of the big ones, but if any come up, please forward them through, and then we can have we can hear the responses to those questions and have a deeper discussion in 2 weeks, is it? 2 weeks from tonight?
2 weeks.
Okay.
Actually, is it 3 weeks? I think it's 3. It's April 13th.
Oh, that's right, because some people have this thing called break.
You can.
Mine was canceled. Got me. I was supposed to plan it, screwed up. Okay, are we good with that? Kabreed, I want a thumbs up from you. That's it, all right, okay, with that said, then let's move on to, our agenda.
I think I didn't have a chance to thank you guys. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Okay, Greg and Steve, thank you so much. Next, I would like to hear, we're gonna just do a quick flyby on any updates on district committees, state and other fun extracurricular stuff that we do. Superintendent Student Advisory Council.
We had a meeting this past week, 2 nights ago, and two major topics were discussed. Number one, we spent a lot of time talking about our wellness days. We got feedback from our students. We had a wellness day that day. And so the feedback from the crew was great. It'll help to shape future work. Secondly, we also spent a lot of time talking with students from SAFE and spent some time reflecting on their request for administration and their and the student protest from 2 Fridays ago. And we also asked them to help engage us and our community in the community on April 12th that I mentioned during my experience. So we look forward to those conversations continuing.
And can I supplement that, or
I'd be happy for you to supplement.
Our students once again continue to
They're great.
amaze me in terms of, if they could, because my understanding of the situation was not, and it was when I had a chance to hear from students. And our students from SAFE actually had a list of, the word is demands, but 5 suggestions that were just so well thought out and realistic and thoughtful that,
They're also doable.
doable, yeah. I mean, they were saying like, we don't need you to change the state law or do this. We just need some cooperation here. So I'm thrilled by their input. All right. I go.
We met on the second Saturday, whatever that date was, I know it was, March 11. However, there was a candidate forum that day that I think some people were trying to get to, who were on the committee, who are current candidates, so it was very short and really just a recap of what everyone was doing in their respective.
Next is CFC, so I'll update this one. We had a meeting. Okay.
Thank you, culture climate.
Yes, thank you. My advice is taken over. Good job.
CCB, I wanted to thank Kabreed for leading the meeting, the last meeting that we had. I don't know if he has anything to add, but I know they were having conversations around safety, and I'm looking forward to the last CCB meeting, that being this community meeting on April 12th. And so I hope as many of the board can make it as they can.
That'd be great.
Okay, Apple? No update?
No update.
That's fine. Sustainability. The students are kicking butt and taking names in terms of putting together a really the data for our dashboard of what all of our energy, they're at it. I think you said they're doing better than any.
They're doing great. And I also am going to say City Law, who sponsored that, is fabulous. She was here a month ago or so, and Manolo Elos, who is the kind of leader of that crew. He was recently nominated and received through West 40 the Student Citizen of the Year Award, which is quite special for his efforts. And I just thought of it right now to share, but we will put that in future announcements for sure. He and I were just talking about that today, so very exciting for him. Very exciting.
Okay, facilities. We don't have anything to talk about facilities. That's right now. Community council.
I was out of town that you attended, right?
Yeah, we talked about this thing called funding for project 2, so you want me to recap the whole? Boosters.
Boosters makes a personal and so reported at our last meeting.
Clause.
Nothing to put, I'll give some minutes from the president for the next meeting.
Right, thank you. And alumni association.
There's nothing to report.
And with that, any future agenda items?
Motion to adjourn.
So.
All in support?
Aye.
Aye.